This is my Zero Breeze Mark II 1-year review and Q&A. And the big question is, does it still work? Yes, it works great. It's worked flawlessly ever since I took it out of the box. I've definitely put it through its paces and given it a good workout for the last year, and it's cooling just as efficiently as it did when I first opened up the box. I also got a new battery since last year, so I've increased my capacity and run time. So here's what we'll be going over in this video. And before I start, I just wanted to say that Zero Breeze did contact me and asked me if I wanted to partner with them on this video. Apparently, Zero Breeze caught wind of my original review videos. They said they appreciated my honest review, and they contacted me just recently and asked me if I wanted to partner up on this video. They immediately said they want no editorial control and no control over what I show or say. So I said yes and got to work. And this is also an opportunity to clear up some of the questions I get often on my videos. Here's the table of contents, and if you look below, you can see that I've split this video up into chapters, so you can skip ahead if you want. First up, my overall impression of the Zero Breeze Mark II over the last year, how it's worked out for me, any issues I've had. Then the rest of the video, I'll go over all the questions that come up across the internet about the Mark II and try to get those answered. Will this cool my van, car, boat, tent, or any other space? It's so expensive. Why would I buy this? Is it worth it? Does it work better at night? Will it cool my space at night? Can I run it with a battery? How much power does it use? How long will it run? Why do you have both hoses going outside? Why not just get one of those cheap personal air coolers I see online? Some guy online said it's a scam. Where does all the condensation go? Is it noisy? And conclusion. First up, my impressions after 1 year and how has it held up? As I said in the beginning of the video, it's held up just fine. It's been running strong for over a year. I used it through last summer and into this spring, and it just keeps going. If you've seen my other testing videos, you can see I use it in an extremely hot environment, and I really put it to the test. Here's a springtime test, 95 degrees inside the vehicle, putting out about 63-degree air, which feels absolutely wonderful. And I've said, an air conditioner this size at 2300 BTUs can't cool a space in these kind of conditions, but it keeps me cool. Not dripping sweat in a 100-degree vehicle, that's priceless. Later on in the dead of summer, it got really hot. I had my Yeti stored in a little cubby underneath the Mark II in its own little space down there where I removed a seat. And that worked well until the temperature inside started getting around 100, and then the Yeti started throwing alarms and shutting down, so I had no choice but to take it out. And here's later on in summer, running about 106 degrees inside the vehicle. The Mark II is still putting out 71-degree air, and it just keeps going. There's nothing I can throw at it that makes it stop working. My battery still shows about a 200-watt draw, running on normal in a 106-degree vehicle. I have to say, after what happened to my original Zero Breeze, I was skeptical. I was skeptical that this could handle these extreme conditions, but I've been pleasantly surprised. It just keeps going. It's gotten dirty, banged up, roughed up, scratched up. Was unstrapped a couple times and went flying around my vehicle. I plug it back in and it just turns on and keeps going. Kudos to the engineers. They built a tank of an air conditioner. And remember, I purchased this through crowdfunding. I paid them on day one that crowdfunding started. So this is one of the very first units that must have rolled off the assembly line. So it's held up, and my impression is positive. Next question that comes up in various forms: will this cool my van, boat, classic car, tent, or other space? Well, that depends. First, let's look at the specs of the Mark II. The cooling power is 2300 BTUs. Compare that to your car's engine-driven air conditioner or a rooftop RV AC. Your car might have a cooling capacity of 15 to 20,000 BTUs, your RV air conditioner 13.5 to 15,000 BTUs. If you've ever been like me and, let's say, parked an RV in Texas at a rest stop in the dead of summer, that 13,500 BTU RV air conditioner can just barely hold temperature, let alone cool a space. A lot of customers seem to be disappointed that it won't cool their van, car, boat, or tent. At 2,300 BTUs, though, it's really only rated to cool 25 to 40 square feet of space in ideal conditions, so it just really wasn't made to do such a thing. So even if you're asking the Mark II to cool a small space, and the view outside your window looks something like this, it's probably not going to cool your space down. It just wasn't designed to do that. So why in the world would someone buy this if it won't cool my space down in full sun in the dead of summer? Let's get to that now. It's so expensive. Who would buy this? Is it worth it? Well, you're looking at it right there. I would. The Mark II's been such a game changer for me personally. I made my very first internet review videos about the Mark II. I was that excited about it and what it did for me. So, if you're on the fence about buying it, think of a hot place. If you're watching this video, I'm sure you can think of a time, a setting, a place where you either are or going to be hot. Sweaty, dripping sweat, unhappy, sweat in your eyes, just unhappy. And for whatever reason, you're going to be stuck in that place for some time. And you would do anything in the world to just not be dripping sweat. As I said in my experience, this won't cool my space if the space is getting beaten down by the sun, but it keeps me from dripping sweat. No more stinging sweat in my eyes, no more soaking clothes. After I've had to sit in here for a few hours, it just keeps me comfortable in a 106-degree vehicle. Now, I do have to stay in the airstream coming out of it. The moment I move out of that airstream, the sweat just instantly comes out like magic. But as long as I stay in that airstream, no dripping sweat. And that just goes for a sealed-up car in full sun in the desert. Who else might benefit from the Mark II? Well, anyone at night, where you might have a chance to cool a space. I've read many comments on user groups where people have had great success cooling their space at night with the Mark II. And let's move away from cooling spaces. Let's not forget, this is a handheld portable air conditioner. It comes in right around 16 pounds. A handheld portable compressor-driven air conditioner you can take anywhere. And with the Zero Breeze proprietary battery, this is it. This is the whole package, coming in around 28 pounds. 28 pounds for a completely self-contained, self-powered air conditioner. And because of that, I don't just use it at work in my vehicle. I'll pull it out, slap the Mark II battery on it, move it around my shop while I'm working. It's hot in my garage, so I've got cold air blowing on me and I feel great while I'm doing a little sharpening, over on my workbench, doing any other kind of project. I've had it set up next to my table saw and I just got it blowing on me while I'm ripping down a bunch of 2x4s. And it's portable. You can take it anywhere. Take it to your kid's soccer game. Blow cold air on you while you watch the game. Take it to a tailgate. Take it to a picnic. Take it to a brew pub patio and put it on the ground in front of you and blow cold air up at your lap. Take it to your office. If you can run the exhaust hose out a window, you can have supplementary air conditioning anywhere. So I agree, it's not for everyone. But if you understand its limitations and its limitations fit within your requirements, it might be for you. It was certainly for me, and I'd buy it again in a heartbeat. Does it work better at night? Will it cool my space at night? Well, we went over this briefly in the last section, but from what people say online, yes, it works fantastic at night when it's not competing with the sun. In my own test, I found it uses less power at night and it will make the air noticeably cooler in a space. Here's just a few comments I pulled from user groups. It cools to about 60 degrees on a muggy 80-degree, 95% humidity night, plus removes about 2 liters of water in the 8-hour span. Takes out humidity and decreases temperature to tolerable from intolerable just for sleeping at night. My little Zero did a great job of keeping the air dry in the van and cool enough to sleep. It would have been misery to have attempted this without it. Let the flex hose blow under a blanket with you under it and it will freeze you out. Great for nighttime, and when it's just too hot in the van, I crawl under a blanket and let it blow under it and I'm good to chill. And I don't just see these posts and comments from RVers. These are from everyone from car campers to semi-truck drivers, who have all had success cooling their spaces overnight while they're sleeping. I haven't personally used it overnight while sleeping. I'm positive it would work based on the tests I have done, but I've read many comments and posts online from others that have had great success with the Mark II at night in cooling their space when the sun's not beating down on it. Can I run it on a battery? Yes, you can run it on a battery. Your first option is the Zero Breeze Mark II battery. It's super convenient, it's plug and play, and it gives you a decent runtime, while being extremely portable. Your next option is your own battery or battery bank. whether that be the battery bank in your RV or one of these portable lithium type of batteries. Understand though, this is very important. Your portable battery probably puts out 12 volts. The Mark II needs 24 volts input. So, if you plan on powering it like this, you're going to need one of these 12 to 24 volt DC converters. I bought this off Amazon. I did have to upgrade to a 20 amp model. I tried a 15 amp model and it just wouldn't supply enough power and the compressor kept cycling. So you see between the 15 and 20 amp, they both look the same, mostly, but they are different. The 20 amp puts out 20 amps, and the wiring's a little more heavy duty and thicker gauge. And that upgrade stopped my compressor cycling. So how much power does it use, and how long will it run? Unfortunately, I can't answer that, just because of all the variables involved. Things like battery capacity, the ambient temperature inside, the temperature outside, the heat load coming into your space, whether you're in the sun or the shade, the time of day, the fan speed the Mark II's on, the cooling mode you're using, and probably more things I can't think of. But I can tell you some numbers in my own experience and my use throughout the last year. Even giving it a good workout in a 106-degree vehicle, putting out about 71-degree air. I'm pulling about 200, just over 200 watts, according to my Yeti battery. My Yeti battery is 1,000 watt-hours, so just the simple math says about 5 hours. And in my experience in these kind of conditions, I've gotten 4.5 to 5 hours in testing on a 1,000 watt-hour battery. To give you some other numbers to maybe help you out and do the math as to how long your battery will last, this is normal mode, 81 degrees ambient temperature with 54% humidity, pulling about 180 watts. So you can see the difference between an 80-degree space and a 106-degree space. Put it on boost mode, the temperature is going to come down a little bit coming out of the outlet, and the wattage will go up to about 200 watts. See, that's about what I was pulling in a 106-degree car, but now in an 80-degree space, you're pulling the same amount of wattage, but you got it on boost mode now, and that'll bring it down to about 57 degrees. Over to sleep mode, everything's going to slow down in the Mark II, and your wattage is going to come down to about 132 or so, which is impressive. 132 watts running a compressor-driven air conditioner. So you can do the rough math there. Take the watt hours of your battery and divide it by those wattage numbers I just showed you on different modes, and you get a very rough estimate of runtime you'll get on your battery. And then raise it or lower it depending on your conditions. This is in an 80-degree space with 54% humidity. And keep in mind, I'm running this straight DC power, so if you're plugging this into an inverter, you're obviously going to use a little bit more power dealing with that conversion. I've gotten this one a lot. Why do you have both hoses going outside? Talking about the rear hoses going to the condenser coil. I get asked, why don't I leave the intake hose going into the back end inside where the air is already cooler? And in this specific use case, if you're not even going to be able to cool the air inside and cool the space down, it really doesn't matter if you have that intake hose inside like it is right there. I've experimented with both. If you have it inside, you have to crack a window because if you're exhausting air from the inside, you got to make up that air somehow. For those that don't understand this concept, we can delve into how air conditioners work a little bit further. So you can think of the Mark II as being two halves, a front and a back, chopped right down the middle. You have a certain process going on in the back and a certain process going on in the front. Here's a video I got from Zero Breeze showing the inside of the unit. On the right side there is the evaporator coil. That's the front of the unit. That brings in the red, hot air from inside your space and blows it through the cold coil and then makes cold air blowing out on you. Then in the back is the condenser coil. So this is the air that needs to come in from outside, blows cool air, as cool as you can get it, through the condenser coil, removes the heat generated by the air conditioner process, and then expels that hot air out the other side. Same process that would be happening in your house if it's air conditioned. This thing is the condenser coil. It'd be outside in the yard or on the roof. This is what expelling the heat from the air conditioning process out into the atmosphere. Then once this pulls heat out of the refrigerant, it sends it back into your house to the other part of the air conditioning system that circulates your house air and cools it down. So back to the Mark II, that part on the left, the back end of it is the same part that would be outside, whether it be your home air conditioner or a window air conditioner with that outside part stuck out the window or an RV air conditioner with the outside part up on the roof. But since this is all self-contained and the outside part is on the inside of the case, you have to use the two hoses to reach outside and do the same thing any of those other air conditioners would be doing, exhausting that hot air generated out into the atmosphere. So the hot air exhaust hose is always going to be exhausting hot air out, which means you're always going to have to be replacing that air from the outside somehow. So whether you have that intake hose directly to the outside, or you bring that hose on the inside of your space and crack a window somewhere, you're somehow going to have to replace that exhausted air with outside air. And just to reiterate, I'm talking specifically about a very hot space in full sun where you have no chance of cooling the space down. This is a different story if we're talking about a space at night where you do have a chance to cool your space down. In that case, you most certainly want to have both hoses going to the outside, because if you have that intake hose on the inside and you are cooling your space down, that exhaust hose is just going to be sucking all your cold air out. So in that case, absolutely, you always want to have both of those hoses outside. So, did that make any sense? Hopefully. I do get asked that question a lot, why I have both of those hoses outside. So I really wanted to attempt to clear that up. Speaking of hoses outside, this is the packing material that came with the Mark II battery. The impressive team over there at Zero Breeze made the top and bottom packing material on the top and bottom of the battery a window filler with two holes already pre-cut, pre-scored, so you can pop those circles out, cut this piece of foam to shape in your vehicle or whatever window, close it up into the window, and then stick your hoses right through the hole, and you got a nice airtight seal through your window. Genius. And if you don't have one of their batteries, you can go to your local home improvement store and buy a piece of rigid foam insulation, cut a couple circles out of the middle of it, cut it to shape to fit into your window opening, and same deal. To finish out this section about hoses outside, I've gotten several questions about where my air is going. Many have said that if I just pipe that air behind my trim panel, it's just going to come right back into the vehicle. My air indeed is coming from and going to the outside of the vehicle. And if you're looking for a way to discreetly install your Mark II into your vehicle, this is the best way I've found to exchange air from the inside and outside, is to find this in your vehicle. They're in every vehicle I've ever seen. It's a pressure relief valve, so when you slam your door, it keeps your windows from blowing out. These little flappies let the air out, and then it closes and doesn't let any rain or anything back in. They're somewhere in your vehicle, behind a trim panel somewhere on vans and SUVs, usually somewhere near the rear quarter panel. On pickup trucks, there are usually two of them on the back wall behind the back seat backs. So I just found out where mine were, and then ran a little port with some dryer vent hose over to two starter collars. That's just a metal HVAC starter collar I used there. Another starter collar on that side, I just put it through a hole in a piece of plastic and then just caulked and screwed the plastic into the side of the car. But I took that flappy pressure relief valve out of there, so now I have a wide open pathway for air to get out. And these are taken out from and installed from the outside. You just got to get those little tabs into the hole. You can see up in here, that's where the hole is. This is up inside the rear bumper cover. I recently sold this vehicle, so this is me just putting it all back together and getting it ready for sale. And once it's set up in there, you just grab a hold of it, pull it tight. This side, there was a little hole in the bottom after the square piece of plastic was screwed in. I just put some foil tape over it. All this is a 4-inch concrete water drain. It's the kind of thing you would see in a concrete patio pad next to a pool or something that water goes into. Had a plastic lattice across it to keep debris out. I just ground it all out with a grinder. You can also use 4-inch starters for woodworking power tools from a woodworking shop. You can get little starter collars like that for dust collection systems. And I had some rags stuffed up in there. There's 2 layers of metal there, and some of that air could potentially make it back into the vehicle, so I just filled the space around it with some rags to make sure all the air came in or out those holes. Anyway, there's an idea for you if you don't want to run those hoses out the window. And there it is, back to normal, good as new. Would never know the difference. Well, that was a rambling answer to a question. If you're still with me, good job. Why wouldn't I just get one of those cheap personal air coolers I see online? So if you get a type like this, it's essentially just some water and a pad inside that soaks up the water and blows air through it. It's essentially a humidifier, the same process as if you went and bought a humidifier that uses the pads, the wicking pads. So the first problem with these is, since they humidify the air, they don't work in humid air. They only work in very dry climates. And even then, the air flow isn't too high, so you're just not going to get that much cooling power out of one of these little $30 units. You've also got the kind that blows air into a cooler full of ice, and the idea is the air gets blown through the cold ice and then goes out a tube, and now you have air-conditioned air. You can try it, but I've been on a quest to cool air for about 14 years, and I've seen coworkers try these gadgets, and they just aren't capable of doing anything worthwhile. But by all means, give it a shot. Maybe it'll work out for you. Now, if your budget's a little higher, you can move up to something like a swampy cooler. This is a hybrid. It's an evaporative cooler and a heat exchanger that uses ice water. This has 2 fans on the back of it stacked on top of one another, and this will move a lot of air, and it actually is quite functional. But it's not $30. I paid $700 for just the box on top of the cooler. Just this piece here, $700. It also came with a pump that goes inside the cooler. So this particular model has that same pad, that evaporative cooler pad, like the other cheapo models, but this moves considerably more air. It also has the heat exchanger just behind it, where you can run the air through the heat exchanger, which has ice water flowing through it. And that actually does a great job at cooling the air, and I used this unit for about 10 years. It worked well. And I did have to make modifications to only use evaporative cooling or only use ice, because from the factory it used both, so it was always humidifying the air and it always had ice water running through it even if I didn't need cold air. So you got to do some work to it to really stretch out that ice. And if you don't have the ice model with the heat exchanger and you just got the one with the pad, so they sell one with just the pad, it's just an evaporative cooler, and if you live in an extremely dry climate, that might work for you. But it's still hundreds of dollars even for that model. Where am I going with all this? So if you really want to cool your air, you need an ice model like this, and that's the problem right there, that cavernous cooler. That holds 40 pounds of ice, and 40 pounds of ice might last me about 3 hours of cooling if I'm easy on it. This manufacturer's website even says that this kind of model, the ice model, can go through 100 pounds of ice per day. This? No ice. This did cool the air with ice water running through it. With a cooler full of ice, it cooled the air as much as the Mark II. But it's that ice. It's that 4 bags of ice every single morning from the gas station at $2 a bag for $8 a day every single time I was working out of my vehicle. So I'm certainly not knocking this brand right here. It kept me comfortable for over a decade. But the reason I switched and I haven't looked back is because look at that. Those 2 things do the same thing. And I don't have to go anywhere in the morning and buy 40 pounds of ice. It's just right there, that's it. 16 pounds. I just plug it into a battery and it runs as long as the battery lasts. I was literally searching for an air conditioner like this for over a decade. And all of a sudden one day, it appeared. And that's why it was a game changer for me and why I'm so excited about an air conditioner. So in conclusion, an evaporative cooler, a high-dollar evaporative cooler that actually moves some air. In an extremely dry climate, if you can pull in dry air from the outside, you can't really use these self-contained inside a space because it just keeps humidifying the air and it stops working. But if all those conditions are met and you live out in the dry desert somewhere, an evaporative cooler might work for you. An ice model that actually pumps ice water through a heat exchanger, not just blows air through a bucket of ice, might also work for you if you're in a humid climate, and you have access to potentially 100 pounds of ice per day. For everyone else, you might consider the Mark II. Definitely more expensive, a lot more expensive, but no ice, no filling it with water, just plug it into power, it makes cold air. But some guy online said this is a scam. Yeah, that's not a question, but I do get that statement made in my comments, maybe 1 out of every 10 comments saying something about this being a scam. Those individuals usually don't explain why it's a scam, and those few that have explained why it's a scam usually say that it won't cool their space or they ordered it and never got it, those kind of things. So like I said earlier, if you expect from the Mark II what it can deliver, if you understand that it won't cool a van down in the middle of Texas in the summer sun, and you buy it because it can do what you want it to do, then it might work out for you. And as far as people ordering and not getting them, I can't speak for those people. I can say that the people I've seen on the user groups say that customer service has handled their issues. They've handled mine, and I've never had any issues with them. Where does all the condensation go? The air conditioning process, especially in humid environments, creates condensation, water. It builds up in the bottom of the Mark II, and once the water level gets high enough, it comes out of the little port on the back where hopefully you have a hose connected that you can port the water out to a container or outside your space. Interesting story, this is the first time while I'm shooting this video I've ever had water come out of the back of this. I live in a very dry climate. I never ever had any water come out of the back of this, even running it for 5 hours in the dead of summer. I never had any water come out until this day. It was a monsoon season, so the humidity was about 55%. So I can say now I feel for you folks that live in humid environments. I can't tell you what to do with this water. I hadn't experienced this until now. So if you can't run this hose downwards and let gravity pull that water out through a door jamb or a weather seal in your vehicle door or something like that, all I can guess is that you get the Mark II elevated up off the floor and you can run that hose into a container. And there's no way around this if you live in a humid environment. It's going to generate some water. So that's definitely something you'll have to think about if you're thinking about getting the Mark II. And if you're curious where that water starts and where it goes in the Mark II, you can see that the condensation starts at the front on the evaporator coil, works its way down into the bottom tray, and as you can see here by those little red arrows, works its way back to the deepest part of the tray in the rear of the Mark II, and as soon as the water builds up high enough, it works its way through the rear port and out the hose. So you can see why you would want to keep it flat, and if you can't keep it completely flat, you'd want it at least a little nose high so that that water makes its way to the back and out the hose. And by a little nose high, I mean a little. My understanding of compressor-driven refrigeration devices is that they all like to be as close to level as possible. Another question I've got many times is it noisy? This is far from a scientific test, but I found a decibel level measuring app on my phone and turned the Mark II on. I'm about 2 feet away from it, which is really close, and it's showing around 55, 56 decibels on normal mode. Turning the fan speed all the way up on normal mode, just goes up a little bit, 57, 58 decibels, still under 60. In my own experience, I sit relatively close to it. I have the hose on the end of the outlet and I have it blowing right on me, right on my face and upper body. I use a Bluetooth headset to talk on the phone, and I'll talk with this thing full blast, full fan blowing right on me, and no one has ever commented about it. Turning it down now to sleep mode. So if you're using this overnight and trying to sleep, you can see the decibels come down and it levels out around, 54 decibels. A little chart in this app says between 50 and 60 is the equivalent of a quiet office or a quiet street. And it's almost down into the 40s, which would be equivalent to a quiet residential area or a park. So, it's a blowing fan, it makes some noise, but in my opinion, no, it's not very noisy. And that completes this extremely long video. Thank you for watching. I hope it answered any questions you might have if you're still on the fence about purchasing the Mark II. I can only speak for me personally, but for me, the benefits of the Mark II, the ease of use, the zero maintenance, the no consumables involved, other than battery power, the benefits of the unit far outweigh the cost for me. Thanks for watching, have a great day, and stay cool.